Welcome back to the BrightWord Books podcast. Today we're joined once again by Ruth Leedy Carr, a journalist and researcher whose 43 years of work on the hollow Mars and hollow Earth theories have challenged mainstream science and ignited passionate debate. Strange blobs of polar light on Mars, covert hints from Isaac Asimov and Carl Sagan, secret photos from the early 1900s. Ruth has pulled them all together to ask who's hiding the truth and why. So get ready for another eye opening conversation. Let's dive straight in. Well, hello there, Ruth. Nice to meet you.
Hello, Mr. Debs. Nice to speak to you.
Ah, fantastic. Well, listen, since your last visit, have you uncovered any new documents, images, or statements that further validate the hollow Mars theory?
Well, did I mention about how Mars has been examined by a satellite, and it's been found that it does contain water. It contains wet rocks near the pole. Has that been mentioned?
Well,
Okay.
you can mention it now. Don't worry whether it's been mentioned before. That's okay. We're just here to have a chat.
Well, it seems to me that if there were ice caps at the pole, that we wouldn't have just heard that wet rocks had been detected. In fact, the ice caps should have covered up the wet rocks. Doesn't that sound reasonable? Anyway, this was announced around 2019 over NPR that NASA had discovered these wet rocks. And after thinking about it, it just occurred to me that this kind of negates the idea that there's a polar cap of ice because well, for one thing, the rest of the planet doesn't have much water on it anyway. And the question was always whether there was any water at all on Mars. And so they were pretty excited to find the wet rocks. But if they can't find an ice cap on Mars, if they can't detect that, what happens to all the times in the past when the experts have pointed to a bright cap of light and said that this was an ice cap? This was really just a guess on their part at the time because there had not been any confirmation. So I hope that this discovery of the wet rocks will cause people to realize that they can question the interpretations of the past, which preceded the actual evidence. You know, well, for instance, in Space Science and Astronomy, there's an article on Mars, and it says you can see there's the southern hemisphere looks pretty dark except for this bright cap of light, and the caption says bright polar cap at bottom, and then in let's see, Pictorial Guide to the Planets, there's actually a caption under one of these photographs that says the ragged melting edge of the ice, and but these captions all predated any actual evidence as to what this light cap consisted of. So I just mentioned this as allowing people to form their own ideas as to what this light cap on the night side might be.
Well, no, absolutely. So what you're saying is that when the first astronomers obviously saw Mars and they saw the white parts near the north and south poles, or what I guess they were thinking were the north and south poles, they just assumed that there are ice caps, much like on Earth, right?
They just really assumed that, and but those white spots really protruded quite a bit from the surface, and so you had to wonder, how could ice have created that strong of a reflection? Ice at a low sun angle, really, and it looks really more like a light shining through a polar hole, if you can consider that. If there were a sun inside the planet shining through a polar hole, yes, it would extend out, and more so than a reflection from ice.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. So on the as far as the wet rocks are concerned, when they make this big statement about the red, having found wet rocks, if I can say it, um, surely they would have already thought that, okay, well, we've got polar ice anyway, so there would be wet rocks around. So why was it such a big deal that they announced that?
well, it seems to me that if they had found detected ice caps at the same time that they had detected wet rocks, that too would have been announced, because it would have been quite exciting to find that much water on Mars. And it just seems odd that they would only announce wet rocks, and they wouldn't announce the discovery of a huge quantity of water in the form of ice
Well,
on
no.
the pole.
Yeah, exactly. So,
That you,
they just mentioned some damp rocks, but not the fact that there's
yeah,
billions of tons of ice. Right, that's what you mean. Um, so, what do you think that it really? I'm just having to think about this because it's very interesting what you're saying, and in terms of the light coming from inside the planet. Um, Explain to me your theory on that then.
it has to do with planet being consisting of a central sun and an orbiting shell, and and this if this is true of Mars, it could be true of Earth. I mean, that increases the likelihood that it could be true of Earth and as Venus as well. And there are photographs of both Earth and Venus that suggest the possibility of a hole at the pole. Um,
Okay, so
but of course, they don't.
no, they don't. Can I just? I'm really interested in this part because. So, is that a suggestion that Mars, Earth, Venus could actually be a Dyson sphere?
It could that they could be. Well, a spheroid is a better term because the poles have to be open. If the shell is orbiting around the central sun, the orbiting material can't remain stationary at the axis, so there has to be a hole at the north and south poles. And there's a model for this in the form of the spheroidal planetary nebula, which has a central star and an orbiting shell of some kind of gaseous material that they can see through it and see that there's a star inside. And the interesting thing, it was described in Britannica as H.D. Curtis of the Lick Observatory found in 1918 that um, that these oblate, spheroidal, and truncated shells thinner at the equator. This is the phrase I wanted. Thinner at the equator than at the poles accounted satisfactorily for the appearance of many planetaries. And I thought this was a remarkable statement because it told me that if the Earth is hollow, that the equatorial portion of the shell must be thinner than the polar portion. And this would explain why the axis is tilted. And I don't know exactly how the solid Earth theory explains the axis tilt, but this would really explain why the axis is not bolt upright. Because the planet, if the planet bulges out at the equator, you would think, if it were solid, you would think that the most massive portion would be under the bulging equator. And so therefore the sun's gravity should pull the axis upright permanently. But if it's more massive above and below the equator, then the axis should be tilted, alternately toward the sun. The temperate regions should be tilted alternately toward the sun.
Hmm. Wow. So okay, so you've cited sort of covert clues from Asimov and Sagan. If they were alive today, still, what do you think they'd say about all of this?
I don't know exactly what they would say because they probably wouldn't say anything different from what they said during their lives because the whole rationale for them giving secret messages is that they weren't really free to give uh, honest messages.
Yeah.
Now I found one unequivocal coded message from Asimov, and I've got the paper right here. I don't know if you want to hear it.
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, it's from the story Frustration, which is in the Gold collection, and I was looking for a coded message because I knew the anagram messages. The anagram messages were not unequivocally proven to be messages. So, but a coded message would be provable to be a message. So, what I found was 3 names from his novel Nemesis. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but anyway, that's an earlier novel that he had written. So, the first name is Mary, Merry, and the passage where that is encoded goes like this. Oh, you're looking for the letters before and after commas and apostrophes. So the passage goes like this. You know, make the bums shape up. We're strong enough to do it. By force? By war, you mean? Okay, and so the first comma is after no, and then there's an M following that, make, where make the bums shape up. So that's the first letter, M. And then you come to an apostrophe at we're strong enough to do it. We're, before and after that apostrophe, you get the E and the R. And then the next thing is a comma between war and you. And that brings in the R and the Y. So the total letters that have been written there are Mary, Merry, which is the name of the character from that novel, Nemesis. The second name will be in this passage. There won't be a war. There's no realistic combination of events that would make the computer decide on war. Computers place a greater value on human lives than human beings do themselves. And, okay, so the first apostrophe is at won't. There won't be a war. So you write the T after the apostrophe. And then there's another apostrophe at there's no realistic. So E apostrophe S for theirs. So you've written a T, and then you write the E and the S. And then then there's a long section with no commas and apostrophes. And then the next comma comes between themselves and. So you get an S and an A there before and after that comma. So the total letters you've written would be T, E, S, S, A. That's Tessa is the name of another character from the novel Nemesis. And then the third example is, I don't know of any way of programming a computer to give it what it is most needed to start any war, any persecution, any devilry. And the name we're looking for is Renee. And the first comma here is between war and any. So that gives you the R and the A. And then between persecution and any, you get the N and the A, because there's a comma there. And then after devilry is another comma, and then before that comma is the Y. So the letters that you've now written are RANAY from that section. So normally in writing down the letters before and after commas and apostrophes, you don't get any words at all, or you get little 3-letter words. To find 3 5-letter names from the same novel is way beyond coincidence. And there's another word in there that's 5 letters long that's from the same story. And that word is Celts, C-E-L-T-S. And I didn't see that it was relevant at first, but I mention it. And there's another word that could be included. In the end, I think what he's doing with the 3 names is directing the reader's attention to the novel Nemesis, and which is a novel in which Earth is threatened by a secret star, a star that the people of Earth haven't been told about, that is headed for Earth. And so he's directing our attention to this novel, which to me suggests that he may be trying to tell us that there is a secret star. Well, the way the novel is written, I interpreted that he could be trying to tell us that there's a secret star in Mars that is in danger of heading for Earth. But that's just my interpretation. But if you add the word Celts is of three names, and then there's one other word, you could come up with a riddle. But a riddle is not strong evidence of anything, because a riddle can be interpreted several ways. So, but at least what this does is proves that he was secretly trying to tell us something, and it was probably cataclysmic, because he refers us to a cataclysmic novel that he already wrote. This is the only really slam dunk proof that Asimov had a secret message for the public, and that he couldn't say publicly, that he was somehow restrained from delivering in any other way. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I see what you mean about the the coincidence of the 5-letter words being being able to come out there. So that is interesting. So, and what about Carl Sagan then? What were his messages?
Well, the most interesting one from Sagan was the fact that he had a character named Stefan Alexeyevich Baruda, who was a kind of a doomsday prophet. And if you look into that name, well, the fact that the name contains an S, to me, made me look for the word axis, because my whole research is about an axis shift on a hollow planet, causing the holes to move. So, right. But anyway, so and my research is also about the axis shift being precipitated by a reversal of the Earth's magnetic field. So, in this name, Stefan Alexeyevich Baruda, you can find Earth axis shift. You can spell that. Plus, you can also spell field reversal. And I just think, and the fact that this character was a doomsday prophet, and the fact that the public, in this novel, the public is portrayed as being very concerned about the possibility of an Earth axis shift. And the reason is that there's been contact from outer space, from Vega, and this has caused the people, the public, to speculate that this is a harbinger of an Earth axis shift. So the fact that this character is a doomsday prophet, and he's really aggravating these axis shift fears, even though he doesn't mention axis shifting himself. He's aggravating these axis shift fears, and his name spells Earth axis shift, as well as field reversal. To me, this is just kind of a tour de force. It's saying about as much. Well, I mean, I've got a complete translation of what the anagram message may be, but this is giving us about as much as one can hope to receive from an anagram message. I mean, I can't prove that he did this deliberately, but what kind of a coincidence is it that you have a novel where Earth axis shifting really figures in the plot, and you have a character who's aggravating axis shift fears, and his name spells Earth axis shift as well as field reversal. I just feel like that's a very strong warning.
It's interesting, isn't it? I like that. It's I think that it's quite interesting, and I suppose I need to ask really so do you think, before we go on to how a hollow Mars could impact our current understanding of planetary formation, do you actually are you saying that the fact that there's a hollow planet, or hollow planets can exist, that they're natural formations, or are you saying they're not natural?
I think that they are natural formations, and now NASA recently, last year announced the discovery of a distant planet shaped like a collapsed football. And this, to me, indicates that not only that a planet can be hollow, but that a hollow planet can lose its rotational momentum and not be rotating fast enough to maintain its shape. In other words, gravity would pull it inward if it weren't rotating fast enough. And so it appears that NASA has discovered this problem out in outer space somewhere, that a planet has actually, a hollow planet existed, and then it has collapsed. And to me, this relates to Mars because I don't think Mars can have any support for its rotation. The solar wind can set off changes in the Earth's rotation rate because the solar wind is directed to the north and south magnetic poles by the shape of the magnetic field. It's funneled and concentrated at the north and south magnetic poles. And so when there are solar storms, you get changes in the Earth's rotation rate several days later when the solar wind, the extra burst of solar wind reaches Earth and sets off a slightly, a stronger push at the magnetic poles. And this has been mentioned by the authors of The Jupiter Effect, John Gribben and Stephen Plogman. So that these changes in rotation rate can't be taking place on Mars because Mars no longer has north and south magnetic poles. So this means that Mars is not receiving these boosts. I'm interpreting these changes in rotation rate to be on balance, probably boosting and supporting rotation, and that Mars cannot be receiving any such support from the solar wind because it has no magnetic poles to cause the solar wind to be concentrated at those key points. And so that means that the rotation of Mars, in all likelihood, is slowing down a lot faster than the rotation of Earth is slowing down. I think the rotation of Earth is only slowing down because the solar wind loses a little bit of its strength, very little bit of it over time, and so that its impact in supporting Earth's rotation is somewhat slightly diminished over time. But on Mars, there's no support whatsoever. So I'm just guessing that Mars must be slowing down much faster than Earth. And of course, now I can find a lot of anagrams from Asimov about Mars going limp. Mars is not yet limp, and that can be found in the character named Limar Panyets.
Right.
So, I can go through the novels and find various messages that support what I'm looking for, but that doesn't prove very much.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, so we're talking about it's a natural phenomenon, and so what you're saying to me, it sounds as if like the accepted kind of solar system growth, if you like, is you've got the star in the middle, you've got, is it called an accretion disk or something, where everything else that sort of orbits the sun just gradually comes together and forms planets and things like that. And what you're saying is that rather than that happening, what's actually happened with this particular sun, which could be a lot smaller, but it sounds like it's a lot smaller, obviously, than our sun, that instead of a set of planets forming, it's forming a shell or a crust around the sun. Have I got that right?
The inner planets do have a higher proportion of heavier elements.
Right.
And I've read that several times in the works of Asimov. I can't remember exactly where, but he mentioned it from time to time, that there's a higher proportion of heavier elements. And so the outer planets are gas giants.
Yeah.
They're considered to be incipient suns. And so, but they don't have enough heavy elements to form a shell. They get moons around them, or maybe a ring or something like that. But when you get to the inner planets, you have the higher proportion of the heavier elements, and that's why that's why they could form a shell. They could be thrown outward by whatever the force is that causes heavy things to be thrown out.
Mm.
uh, I'm not an expert on everything.
Sure, sure.
So, but they could, instead of just throwing a few moons into orbit, the protoplanet throws all these heavier elements out into orbit, and they form a shell over time. They, for a period of time, I would say, in the creation of the solar system, the shell would have been a nebula,
Mm.
and it would have gradually solidified. And so it seems to me easy enough to conceptualize that this could have happened gradually over time. Whereas with a solid planet model, you've got to have a kind of a magic moment where all the heavy elements kind of got together and said, well, let's get together and form a planet.
Yeah.
And you've got to ask yourself, well, what was it that caused them to get together? With the hollow Earth theory, you've got the fact that they were always in orbit around this central sun. And so there was never any magic moment where they had to decide to form a planet. They were always right there around, circling this central sun.
Mm. So, okay, that's interesting. So how much would that change our current understanding of planetary formation then in the solar system? It sounds like it would just turn it over on its head.
Well, I just think this is a case. I think this is a case where Occam's razor really applies. I think the hollow Earth theory offers a very simple explanation. It says that the Earth started out like a spheroidal planetary nebula, only smaller. And the fact that we can see the spheroidal planetary nebula out there in the heavens tells us that that's a viable form, that it will rotate, and so we can. It's not too hard to believe that this could have formed in our solar system, and that gradually over time it could have solidified into a solid shell, not a solid ball, solid all the way through, but just a solid shell.
Mm.
And it's just a simple explanation. And whereas I think the solid planet theory requires more mental gymnastics to figure out how the planet, how all these heavy elements decided to get together and form a planet.
Yeah. I guess I guess one of the things, of course, is that would mean that a sun could be small, as opposed to us thinking that suns always have to be, well, at least as large as ours, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know about the physics involved. I've heard it said that a sun can't be that small,
Mm.
but I just really think that the photographic evidence from the Mariner 7 photographs of August 4th, 1969, with showing the light caps on the night side of Mars, just indicate that there has to be light coming from inside, because there's no light coming from outside causing light on the night side, and there's nothing there that's alive that's creating light on the night side. So I think that rather than try to prove it theoretically, I think one just needs to look at these photographs of Mars, and they prove that a small, and especially since Mars is smaller than Earth, if Mars can have a little sun inside of it, based on these photos, Earth certainly could have one.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing underlying all this is that there's been a cover-up, and one has to wonder, in researching this, one has to wonder who's responsible and why would they want to cover this up.
Exactly. Yeah.
And focus kind of has to fall on the interior of the Earth as a habitable land, a habitable paradise, as it were, which could could house the rulers of this planet, and they could be the ones that have decided that the solid Earth theory is going to prevail and the hollow Earth theory is going to not prevail.
Yeah.
So, but exactly how they exert their influence against the scientists is a puzzle. I mean, you can find anagrams from Isaac Asimov. Well, you take Carl Sagan's book title, Broca's Brain. That struck me early on in my research, that it sounded just like broke his brain, Broca's brain. And so that kind of tipped me off that perhaps he had something to say about about secrecy and about pressure being applied to scientists to not reveal things. And also in Sagan's book, there are two other important puzzles. One is the name Tyrone Free, is the name of a prisoner, and that translates to I-E-Y-E, capital R, I-R, not free. And the other puzzle along this line is the name Ian Broderick. The first 5 letters spell the word brain, and I believe the translation of that is brain could be broken and I could die, and could would be spelled C-O-O-D. Along the same line, Asimov had a riddle on a character named Mentor First from the Norby novels. And in Mentor First, I found, I'm not free. It mortifies me. And there are others, a lot of other messages that I found, anagrams, along this line. But as I say, you can come up with 100 anagrams and still not persuade anybody.
No, exactly.
But anyways,
well, no, it is interesting though. So, why would you think? I know you've mentioned that you don't really know. Obviously, none of us would know. But what are the theories at the moment then as to why the science community are covering up if this is true?
As to why they're covering up, because whoever's ruling the planet, whether it's an individual or a political force, those people have an agenda, some kind of an agenda. It could be that they want us to be taken by surprise by a cataclysm so that they can come at us with a fake rescue mission and then gather us up and then use us for biological purposes. Now, that's one possibility that I considered. Another possibility is that they really do want to destroy this planet. And why would they want to destroy it? Perhaps they have plans to settle elsewhere, and they just don't want to leave a competing planet behind. That's another possibility. But as to, it's really hard to penetrate the motives of people, and you don't even understand what they look like. You've never seen them, never talked to them, had no chance to. And I mean, I always thought I was in danger doing this research and doing these books back in the 80s, and I just assumed I was going to be sacrificed, silenced, and that I just thought I would be killed because I thought the cover-up was being exerted against anyone who would try to reveal these secrets. And so I don't understand why I've been allowed to speak if the experts have not. So, but anyway, most people would just say, I've been allowed to speak because I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, that's true. It'd be difficult, wouldn't it? Well, no, that's fair enough. So, in terms of like private companies, we've got various companies who now are able to launch vehicles into space and things like that. And you would think as well that hopefully some of these telescopes or some of the hardware that's in space would be able to actually examine those sites that you mentioned about was it Viking or in 1969. And do you think that that's happened, or why haven't they done it? Is there a theory for that?
It was, well, actually, the 69 photos were Mariner 7,
Mariner, yeah.
but why haven't they examined further?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. I really haven't kept up with everything that the scientists have done on Mars. You know, I guess you could say I've found the evidence that I was looking for. Now, I did hire a lawyer at one point, and he looked up some information for me from NASA's website, and so included a picture of Mars, which didn't look a bit like any of the other pictures I've seen. It didn't necessarily look like Mars at all.
Mm.
So it didn't reveal anything to me. So yeah, I don't think that any further proof is really needed as far as light on the night side. I mean, the pictures from August 4th, 1969 show exactly what it needs to be seen as far as light on the night side, and you can't prove. I don't know, what could you do? Send your spacecraft into the interior of Mars and have them take pictures there? I mean, I don't really know what further proof could be offered that Mars is hollow.
No, well, no, exactly. I suppose all we could really do is see this light that, as you say, is coming from the center of the planet, perhaps, and we could actually see it again, at least in better definition, maybe. I don't know. But okay, well, Ruth, we're running out of time here. So, because this is so fascinating, this conversation is great. So, what do you want your readers and listeners to do with all of this information that you've just given us? Do you want them to stay curious, demand transparency from governments, or at the worst, prepare for the worst?
Well, I would like them to get Congress involved as far as investigating, because when individuals just do their own personal research or their own personal reading, the information doesn't really get out, because, I mean, everyone's going to be afraid to share this kind of information with their friends, because, I mean, I'm in the same position. I've had jobs where I wouldn't dream of telling my coworkers that I was researching the hollow Earth theory. The theory has been so trashed that people are afraid they might lose their jobs or their friends if they start trying to share their views on it. And so, in order to get the truth out, I don't know. I was hoping my lawyer would instigate a court case that would establish that Mars is hollow, and I would hope that readers would contact their Congress members and ask for an investigation of this evidence, because if they just keep it to themselves, the truth is never going to be established. It has to come from some authoritative source, and so that everybody can see it, that it's true, and that they won't have to be embarrassed by trying to share it with their friends.
No, exactly. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, Ruth, we have run out of time, unfortunately. Oh, such a shame. But thank you so much for sharing your research and, your bold perspective with us today on the BrightWord Books podcast. So, listeners, if you're
Oh, well,
listening,
you've been very kind.
I think it's fascinating. It's always good to hear, different theories especially when they come to something to do with science. I think it's great. So, listeners, if you're listening and you'd like to learn more about hollow planets, covert scientific secrets, and the mysteries of our solar system, of course, grab a copy of Ruth Leedy Carr's book, which is available now on Amazon. So again, Ruth, thank you very much for joining us. It's been fascinating. I hope you've enjoyed it, telling us all about everything.
I enjoyed every minute. Thank you so much for putting up with us.
No, not at all, not at all. So brilliant. Stay curious, everyone. Stay questioning, and we'll see you next time on the BrightWord Books podcast. Take care.